Today we are diving into Gongneung-dong, a hidden gem in northeast Seoul that was once home to Korea's forgotten legend, the warrior idols, the Hwarang. These elite youths were the trendsetters, the rockstars of their era, admired for their beauty and revered for their skills. Their legacy still echoes through the streets, where the modern Korean military academy now stands. With the help of Professor David Tizzard, we're unraveling the legendary and mysterious world of the Hwarang. I, for one, had never heard of the Hwarang before shooting this video, and I couldn't help but imagine giving V from BTS a sword and sending him into battle. This is just one of those neighborhood stories I can't wait to learn more about. I am here with Professor David Tizzard. He has been in Korea for nearly 20 years.
19 years, yeah, nearly 20.
He has a PhD in Korean Studies, lectures at 2 different universities. We have Seoul Women's University,
Which is just up there,
and
Hanyang University,
you may know him from the podcast Korea Deconstructed.
which you've been on.
But today he will introduce his neighborhood, Gongneung-dong in Nowon-gu.
Absolutely, and I've lived here since 2007, so welcome to my dong.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, I've been here since then, and I've seen lots of changes. More importantly, I've seen not many changes. And I'm very thankful for that. I thought we might start with this statue, which if we turn around here,
There it is.
there it is. This is the statue of the Hwarang. What do you know about the Hwarang? Do you know anything about the Hwarang, Bart? Is it a history class?
I know they're a beautiful elite warrior group.
Yes.
They reminded me a lot of the knighthood,
Yes.
chivalry, Shilla dynasty.
Yes. We're done. We're finished.
Yeah, we're
Perfect.
done.
There goes Bart. Well done. You can do
That
my
was it.
lectures
Welcome
next
to
time.
my
The Hwarang, obviously, it comes from flower, so the flower boys. The idea is that they're on their way to becoming men. So they're not children, they're not adults, but they're in this process. So rather than knights, we might understand them as Boy Scouts or in that sort of adolescent stage. To learn about the Hwarang, I did something very interesting. Because there's lots of modern interpretations. I'll tell you about the drama, the 2016 with Min Hyo and V from BTS and Park Seo-joon from Itaewon
I
class.
found that on YouTube.
Yeah, that's what comes up. I decided to read the Samguk Sagi and the Samguk Yusa. Samguk Sagi was written in the 1100s. Samguk Yusa was written in the 1200s by the monk Ilyon. And they're talking about the Shilla dynasty from 500 AD, 600 AD. And both of these books, they reference the Hwarang, not very much, but they have the foundation myth of the Hwarang in both of these books. And it's only about a paragraph, but they talk about how the Hwarang came about. And this is before we get all the modern interpretations and things like this.
This is fascinating. The best source we have on the Hwarang comes from just a few paragraphs in ancient books. And yet, here we are, still talking about them. It really shows how certain events in history walk a thin line between being forgotten or remembered.
Now in the Samguk Sagi and the Samguk Yusa, they talk about a group, 2 beautiful women. It starts with 2 women.
Okay.
One is called Nammo, one is called Chunjeong. And they had many followers with them, and they would go around singing and dancing. So they're kind of, we understand, I might interpret them as shamans. And they sing and they dance, right?
They do.
And they do, and they have followers, people to help them during their ceremonies. So there was Nammo and Chunjeong, and these are the 2 women, but they were jealous of each other's beauty. And so Chunjeong invited Nammo to her house, got her drunk with wine, and then pushed her in the river to kill her. Such was her jealousy of her rival's beauty. Chunjeong was then executed for obviously committing such a heinous crime. There was no continuation of these ceremonies, and so what they decided to do, and this is how it's written, the foundation stories, is they decided to pick the beautiful boys from around to replace the women. So they picked the flower boys to continue on this tradition of singing, of dancing, of traveling, and they instructed the boys to be loyal to each other and to trust each other, to not fall prey to the same calamity that happened to the women. And also, they're kind of like in an RPG, they're instructed to go out and visit beautiful places, do poetry, get their morals, and be loyal to each other. So that's how the Hwarang
So they were not only warriors.
They're not only warriors. The Shilla dynasty obviously conquered, unified the whole peninsula. And so a lot of the latter interpretations we get of that glorify the Shilla efforts because they were the ones that eventually won. So the Hwarang, there's lots of shamanistic influences there originally, but that's how it's presented in these 2,000-year-old texts, essentially.
Wow.
Long before the military aspects were imposed, it was religious, it was cultural, it was based on singing and dancing and these kind of things. As the Joseon dynasty comes in, 1392, and we get the arrival of sort of Chinese influence, Yisonggen, the Confucianism, Neo-Confucianism that comes in, the Hwarang kind of, and their name falls more into disrepute. It's associated with sort of more shamanism and laziness and sorcery sorcery and getting towards more ideas of male prostitution. So where Buddhism falls away from being the national thing that brings people together and it's replaced by NeoConfucianism, also the association with the Hwarang kind of changes at that time as well.
Then David explains how the Hwarang have been reinterpreted through different eras to fit the needs of contemporary society. The Hwarang serve as a reflection of the times, whether it's through sexuality, military ideals, patriotism, or even modern idols. We saw this in the 2016 drama about the Hwarang. They become whatever you need them to be. I really like this perspective.
They're a mirror. And if you're not sure what the Hwarang kind of look like in their modern thing, there's a popular, I get in trouble for this, popular Japanese game called Zelda.
Oh.
And in that you get like the character Link, and they have sort of hair that comes down here and kind of pointy ears and swords and spells, that kind of stuff. That's the modern representation of the Hwarang.
Or you can come to the statue.
Or you can come to the statue, or you can find the people inside the Yuksa Military Academy, because the cadets in there, they are also called Hwarang today.
The cadets, today's Hwarang, the military academy, will be our next stop. But first, David wanted to share a story about meat and its connection to the military academy.
Did you expect to hear about meat today?
No.
You might have heard of something called Tenon Galby. I was in the countryside today and I saw a shop called Tenon Galby. But we're in Tenon, there's no Tenon Galby shops here. That's the interesting thing. You might have noticed, Bart, that there's not much around here. There's not really many shops, there's not many pubs, there's nothing like that.
No, it's almost a bit boring.
It's almost a bit boring, and I hope it stays that way. During the Joseon Dynasty, people that worked with meat, they were one of the lowest classes.
Yeah,
so
the baekjeong.
The baekjeong, exactly. And so these were close to slaves. They didn't want them in the center of Seoul. They didn't want the people working with meat close to the palaces, close to the royalty, to the Yangban. And so they pushed them out to the outskirts, which is where we are now. We're in the outskirts, and that's why you get Tenon Galby and you get Suwon Galby. So it kept the meat far away. And so until around 1980, there would be lots of galbi places around here, and they would produce the meat around here. Chun Doo-won, the president, in the early 1980s, a controversial figure in himself, he decided that if the cadets in the military academy kept smelling the Tenon Galby meat, if they kept smelling this beef, they would become hungry. So in the early 1980s, Chun Doo-won told all of, this was not a democratic decision, he told all of these galbi shops to get out, to go somewhere else, to keep the cadets here, to stop them smelling the meat, to stop them get distracted by meat and booze and alcohol.
Is this for real?
This is what I've heard.
Oh
if
my
anyone
God.
has a different story, tell me. But that's why this place is boring. It used to be the Tenon place, Tenon Galby, and all of those meat restaurants went, so the soldiers didn't get hungry. That's the early 80s.
I feel so sorry for the cadets.
One of the big paradoxes is this place is a campus town. So this train station here, this would serve, it would serve the military academy, which is just here. It would serve Seoul Women's University, which is just there. And then you have Samyuk University, which is just up there. Gwagide is just over there. And all the students would congregate here. And the great irony is was a campus town, no pubs. Actually, it's really good for my drinking habits, because if it was, I would be in them all the time. But if you consider places like Hongdae or Gondae, these kind of really hip areas, and they're just lined rows and rows of pubs and meat places.
Keep them away from all the life pleasures.
Distractions and things like that. Yeah, get down to your joy.
It's very next to the women's university. That's smart.
That was alwaalys a big dating thing. They would always get it. Nobody was using the train thing, right? And they were like, And then they decided, let's do something with it. And so they decided to turn it into a public space for the people. And the people do use it. It's wonderful to see.
Lots of children.
Lots of families, lots of children, and it remains green. We're in Seoul, just about. We're right on the limits of it, but we're in Seoul, and you get these wonderful open green spaces. And
we made it to the Korea Military Academy.
We did, and this is where the people that defend the Korean nation, the officer class, they will go and study here. One of my favorite expressions comes from George Orwell, when he says, people sleep peacefully in their beds because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. And when you're in Seoul, you think very little of the Korean War. You think very little of the dangers of what goes on. But really, the Cold War here hasn't ended. You may have seen on social media that I got a present from Chairman Kim Jong-un recently, dropped right on my house.
That was so funny.
It was annoying, but it was just a balloon full of rubbish that dropped on my house. And a lot of the safety and a lot of the comfort that we experience on the subway and in the coffee shops is because of people that exist in these places. This is the military academy, and this is where people will come. It's very interesting because it's almost like a university in that
that's why they call it the day.
Yeah, exactly. And people will come and study here, and they'll do 4 years of study. As they're doing their military training, they will also be doing a regular degree. And so they come in, they choose them, they have professors. You'll know what grade they are because first year, second year, 1학년, 2학년, they'll have a stripe on their shoulders, which represents it, so you can see these people. And inside, when they're in there, they're called Hwarang. So there's the connection to the modern day.
You can tour the academy. You only need to make a reservation. However, filming is not allowed, which is why we stayed at the front gate.
Tuition in Korea these days is very expensive to go to university, anywhere between like 3 and 7 million for one semester. Here, not only do you not pay tuition, you actually get yeondon. You get money and everything. It sounds like an advert for Yuksa, right? Here's a really interesting story about the people in Yuksa. When they sit their test, when they do their midterms and final exams, just like normal university students, they have to wear yeobok, which is like a ceremonial uniform. And it's white and it's very extravagant. And when they sit their tests, professors do not watch them take the test. It's based on an honor system. This was all men. The first women started entering Yoksa because when we talked about the Hwarang, we talked about that change from sort of the women performing it to then the men taking over. Women first started studying here, I believe it was around 1998. So very recently, that was when they first entered. Interesting, you can see the advertisements here, like right at the front of Yoksa. Yeah, it's 50-50. And this does match my real experience of what happens when I walk around.
I truly loved hearing about the Hwarang, its modern interpretation and its connection to the military academy. The Hwarang statue can be found at the entrance of Hwarang Station, which is turned into a beautiful railroad park. At the exit of the park is the entrance to the military academy. And don't skip the Tenon royal tomb of Queen Munjung for its magnificent natural surroundings right at the edge of Seoul. Now Gongneung-dong will appear on the Dong map as Hwarang the Flower Boys. Welcome to my Dong.
Adu. And this place was built to honor a queen, Queen Munjung. Sometimes there's these stories to the women of Seoul Women's University. Hey, remember what they did for Munjung? You've got to try to get like that, you know, make them build a big park in your name or something like that.